Welcome everybody to another infield chat sponsored by Valley Sporting Goods. If you're interested in any discounts on their training and apparel, make sure you check out the link in the description. I am joined today by my friends Tyler Packenick and Brandon Zink. Guys, it's fantastic to have you with me to discuss some prep step timing and technique. So let's dive into this a little bit. We'll start with Tyler here. Tyler, give us a little bit of an idea about how you teach prep step, what your beliefs are, and kind of your route to the instruction here.
Yeah, I believe this is the most important thing in all of infield play. Obviously, you got to be able to field a ground ball. You got to be able to throw. There's all these other things that go into defense, right, and infield. But prep steps are number one. This allows guys to make plays more routine. For me, it's just being able to move in any direction with equal effort. That's the biggest thing for me. The timing of it, we'll talk about it enough here, is just being late. Like, I'd rather stay in motion. An object in motion stays in motion.
All right, passing it off to Brandon here. Brandon, how do you and you've got a wide range of ages you apply this to, but how do you kind of introduce this to guys?
Yeah, I think Tyler hit the nail on the head. I think just physically, like Tyler said, the way I talk about it is being late, being athletic, being on the balls of your feet. If you want to call it being on your toes, I know different people perceive it differently, but we'll talk about kind of hand placement and everything. I like hands being close to the hips, but just being athletic and being ready to move and in all directions, eyes in the hitting zone, and just being, like I said, just being loose.
Yeah, I do. I think when you're looking at high level players working into their prep steps, and even guys who maybe are just incredibly athletic, you don't see a whole lot of forward momentum. And rarely do you see momentum to certain directions, right? Usually that's something where we're trying to battle a shift rule, or we're seeing pretty heavy tendencies on a certain pitch, right? Because if it was a location tendency, period, we probably would have shifted there before. So we're going to dive in a little bit to some objective data to give us an idea of who the best ground cover guys are in Major League Baseball. And that way we can kind of dig into their techniques and see what's working best right now. So right now, here's what we have with the data we have access to. Objectively is in quotations there because, again, some of this stuff is dependent on being able to make a play or your positioning. So this is absolutely not the most perfect way to go about finding out best practices or best techniques, but it does give us an idea of what the best in the game are doing to expand their range. And we can also pair this with their sprint speed scores and other little bits and pieces to give us an idea of who's maximizing their physicality. So looking at this list, guys, is there anybody that you would say, ooh, that's interesting that he's on this list, or I'm surprised he's that far down on the list?
I mean, we kind of talked about it earlier, but for me, like, there's no third baseman on this list, but a couple first basemen make it. So those two, to me, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and Tyler, you were talking about previously, like, just the impact of being able to play deeper as a first baseman, especially when you've got a left-handed batter up. Like, the depth that you show as a first baseman there is probably far deeper than you'll see most third basemen play at. Now, with that in mind too, like understanding the limitations with the right-handed batter as well. A lot of guys will prep step towards first, which is interesting. I don't know if that's something I'm buying yet, but it is an interesting technique they do. You'll see the guys in these videos. We'll see one where a player's holding no runner, and then another where a player's playing back, covering ground, and you won't see a directional step. It's pretty up and down, or they're grounded. So we'll take a look at some of these guys, and we'll kind of get a better idea. And Brandon, your guy Jimenez is on this list, so shout out Andres Jimenez for consistently being just a dog. And we'll keep diving into this and figure out some more about these guys. So the first guy we're going to look at here is Simeon. And this video is from MLB Game Day. This is just slowed down to 1/4 speed. It gives us an idea of some technique notes. I like slowing it down because we get a better idea of the movement. Notice here he starts really wide. This is a little bit more wider than usual. We've got a post-contact landing. That way the right foot can land open and work up towards the middle. And then again, some of the bias behind this range score is the ability to finish these plays. That's a backhand glove flip to shortstop. unreal, first of all. But again, we're gonna go back and check this out just for the landing, right? I want just to zero in on the right foot post contact. And I know it's a little bit difficult to speed. That's why we slowed it down to 1/4 speed. But we started pre-contact, we're landing, and we can tuck that right foot in really, really quickly. That way we keep our momentum riding towards the right side of the field. And he's done a great job all year. And then he had a great season at second base. So super fun to watch. Let's dive into the next guy here. All right. Dansby Swanson, who's one of my favorites to watch. Special mover, can finish plays as well. But he's one of the lower arm strength guys in the group. I think he's averaging like 84 across. MLB average is probably somewhere around 86 to 87. But we can see there post contact landing, working towards his left. Special finish, right? But when we're looking at the timing and the techniques here, we really want to dig into the details. So one of the things that Swanson does a little bit differently than a guy like Simeon is in the preset movement. Notice the feet aren't near as wide. They're wide, but he's not near as wide as Simeon. And he does more of a pulse, right? We're not seeing much of a hop from Swanson. It's more of a pulse move. And I think it's funny. Organizationally, you can see certain organizations teach it a certain way, and other organizations kind of leave it up to their players. I think a lot of it has to do with the biomechanics behind the body, the reaction time, what you're trying to optimize, the kind of flight that you feel like you can cover more ground on, stuff like that. And that can get we can dive into that a little bit later when it comes to visuals and flights. But here's your boy, Brandon. Here's your boy. He's shaded middle on a right-handed batter. Jimenez is another guy. He's going to be pretty upright here. We can see like he's very casual, very comfortable. He's got a slight pulse, a little bit of momentum to his left. He's slightly more grounded than the rest. We're noticing here, a slight pulse to his left. He's able to open his left foot up post-contact and move towards his left hard. And notice the drop step here. He's created a lot of space back. He's not just ranging straight to his left. He's ranging left with depth, which is something that post-contact prep step allows us to do a little bit easier than closing off our body.
I think it's important to know, Cody, understanding, and obviously we're going to talk about it a little bit, but understanding your pitcher, understanding what pitches is coming creates that pulse and that ability to, like we just saw with Jimenez, pulsing to the left a little bit, anticipating that ball being hit that way.
Okay. Yeah. And you can see there is a clear like kind of momentum bounce and for sure. And you see that a lot with guys like Lindor too. And Lindor's we'll look at him later, but he's a guy who's like 98th percentile, I believe, in ground coverage, which is really, really high considering his sprint speed score is only in the 58th percentile. So like just slightly above average runner, and he's ranging like he's one of the fastest guys in the game. So the anticipation is a huge piece of this.
I think that's a good point, Brandon. I think that's a good point. Like, I bet if we went back and looked, I don't know if you can even do that or not, but probably a fastball, right? Right-handed hitter.
You'll be able to see flight here.
Yeah, so he's anticipating it being there, whereas if it's a breaking ball, right on right breaking ball here, he might be anticipating it to that pull side more. Yeah.
Let's look at it here. Oh yeah, that's a heater. Yeah, that's awesome.
You could also argue, and it's kind of tough for me to see. I'm kind of zooming in here, but like you could also argue, does the catcher's setup help you with anticipation as well? With that, as the catcher starts to move to the outside half of the plate, does that help you, understand where your pulse needs to move to go?
Well, you got pitch comp too now, like right? What pitch is coming?
I think one of the things too to keep in mind is they have pitch comm around the infield usually in the bigs, but at other levels, I think the maximum is 2, I believe. So you do have to find other ways, like especially as you're climbing or if you're a college player. Now, college we're unlimited, but resources, right? So if you're trying to make sure that stuff is handled too, like how are we getting the most bang for our buck here? You have to find different ways to figure this stuff out. That's a sweet.
Well, it was funny. It was before the pitch comm era. We were playing. I was at Missouri. We were playing Tennessee, and we noticed that their middle infielders would whistle, which alerted their corner infielders that they were throwing off speed, which is a coach base running. It's like, we were able then to relay that they were about to throw off-speed pitches. But yeah, like, you know, there's different ways, right? Whether it's hand signals or whatever. But I'm a big believer. I don't know how you guys are. Like, I want everybody on the field to know what pitch is coming so we can anticipate. You know.
Absolutely. Here's one of the ones that I like. Witt Jr. is a little bit more unique in his prep step. He's also one of the more inconsistent ones, if I'm being honest. A lot of the times he will just be grounded and then react. Other times he'll show something like this where he's got this narrow base. Like he kind of gets wider and goes, right? He's covering ground at a 98th percentile, which is pretty impressive. He's got a cannon for an arm. He can finish plays. One of the things to note, though, is he's also, not that it's a bad thing at all, but he's 100% or 100 percentile sprint speed guy. So he should be covering that ground, right? He should be the guy that can do that. And so I think looking at Witt Jr. and looking at the technique here and some of the reaction times that he's had on balls that I've seen, it almost feels delayed sometimes. Sometimes he's on it, but other times, like, it's almost like he's working as a grounded mover. There's not a whole lot of movement going in. Now you get a guy as twitchy and reactionary as Witt Jr. He can get away with that a lot. But my hot take here is that as good as Witt Jr. was this past season defensively, there's going to be growth over the next couple of years from him, because I think there's a lot more left in the tank when it comes to ground coverage. All right, so here's our one of two first basemen on the list. Now, Santana's also a grounded mover type guy, but like Brandon, you mentioned a while ago, like Santana's one of the shorter first basemen, right?
He is. He's 5'11", and actually that's probably being generous, because I've stood next to him before and I'm 5'11", and he's shorter than I am. So.
But yeah, he's one of the more athletic players. You can see from this play, like he turns on a dime, is able to tag the guy out. But just unreal athlete, being able to be agile at this spot helps a lot with your ground coverage anyway. But you'll see the majority of first basemen, especially the bigger guys. You'll get Vlad Guerrero Jr., Ty France. Those guys are all doing post-contact landings. I think a lot of it has to do with like where they're set up. Santana actually plays a little bit more off the line and a little bit less shallow than most first basemen when it comes to his original setup on lefties. But then he also expands his range more on righties. So I think a lot of it has to do with your coach's positioning and stuff like that too.
His hands are in a different position than everybody we've seen so far too.
Oh yeah, let's look at that. Here we
go.
Go
back.
I like it.
Watch where they get to here.
Oh, he's out in front.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I think I could be wrong on this. I'm going to look it up, but I think he's right. I think his glove is slightly open too, if I remember correctly.
And that's interesting, because when you're trying to maximize range, you usually want to keep your hands a little bit tighter to the body. And when you cut your depth, you'll see that glove show a little bit more, just so you can prepare for those rockets. It's interesting. Not that we don't want to cover ground when our infield's in, but the goal is different, right? So when you see that play from a guy with depth, that's an interesting look there. I wonder if that has anything to do with just a comfortability factor or something that he's done for a while and he's just used to. We've got the same kind of thing from Tovar. Hands a little bit more out in front, less to the hips.
Yep.
This is another play from a guy who can really, really finish it. Now, actually, this play, you can't really tell on the 3D, which is why I used it. But Witt Jr. actually beats that out. But he got the ball to first base in like 4.18 seconds, I think, was the time. Something crazy. But when you watch the setup and you watch how he kind of moves into his pathing on the right, notice how the weight's fairly neutral. Like, they're anticipating flight to a certain direction, I'm sure, but he's not selling out until he's seen flight, right? He's seen flight and then going. And he's more of a grounded mover, Tovar. So he's one of those guys who I like to call it a little bit more old school of an approach. I've only ever seen him get an airborne prep step a couple times, but he's done that his whole career. He's been on the ground for the most part for his whole kind of route up. Now, looking at De La Cruz, this is one of the really more unique ones. Now, we know from looking at Baseball Savant data that De La Cruz is really, really poor covering ground and making plays to his left. And I think we're about to see why when it comes to this prep step. If you've seen him live, you've probably seen this as well. But De La Cruz does a creep step and takes a hard right step almost every time. Now, he's doing that post-contact, but I don't know if that's something that's being taught or if that's something that he just does naturally. Even on this play, he kind of bobbles it and he picks it up, but he also throws 96 across, so he just lets it rip and puts the guy out. But I can see some flaw here. I can see some limitations when it comes to his ground coverage to the left. Now, doing this, your ground coverage to the right should be elite, which looking at the data, it is. He's leading the league, moving to his right. And I think different groups will add more value to that. But we can see just like there's a hard shift of momentum to the right. It's going to limit your range to the left side. And in reality, when you're shifting that hard and you're not airborne landing, it's really hard to set your angles to move back to your left. You're kind of having to rotate over your hip as opposed to being able to organize yourself and move differently to your left. So it's a weird, it's a more weird type play, but also he's an incredible athlete who's very, very fast. Another 100 percentile speed guy, so he can get away with it for the most part. But I think he's another guy we'll see develop more and hopefully get better at that position as time goes on. Here's Volpe. This one, there's a caveat here. This is not what he normally does. I just wanted to show this so people got an idea of how teams will battle the shift sometimes. So we're noticing here that Volpe gets a pretty hard prep step to his left with momentum. He's airborne at contact. He's landing and has to reorganize to his right, which is an incredibly athletic maneuver anyway. But a maneuver that would not be possible had he landed at contact because he'd have so much momentum going to his left. He'd get crossed up, would be able to ride his momentum down towards his right. And we'll take a look at more of his stuff later. But one of the things that I think is really important to note, right, is this is Alvarez as a left-handed hitter against Gonzalez. Volpe is fully anticipating that this ball is going on the other side of second base. That's where the scouting report says. That's why his third baseman is playing essentially straight up shortstop. This coaching point for the third baseman is be as aggressive to the left as you can because this play is incredibly difficult, right? Not that this is Cabrera at third, not that Cabrera could have gotten there anyway, but this is something where if we're going to be making this move with any kind of momentum to a certain direction, it might honestly need to be something where the entire group does it as an infield. That way that third baseman can cover that extra ground to the left if that happens. But just something interesting to toss out there.
Do we know what pitch was there?
Let's take a look at
Assuming
it.
fastball.
Well, and I think it just depends, right? If we would have positioned him over here, we're probably guessing fastball or breaker, and we're still doing this now. It could be something where Volpe's feeling a breaker and he's like, okay, he's going to roll over on it. But I think that's probably up to an organizational detail. That looks like a fastball.
I'd also be interested in what the count is too.
Yeah.
Is the hitter ahead in the count?
I'll find that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder. Like a 2-0 swing, Alvarez is kind of trying to get the head out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of different variables to this stuff that you got to expect that groups are giving players the option to improvise a bit and stuff too. This is one we haven't seen yet. We got a first baseman holding a runner. This one's really, really cool because you can kind of see Walker's anticipation and reaction time compared to the runner here. But he's landing post contact with his right. It's almost like a Ellie De La Cruz type step when you're trying to get yourself out. I don't think that's what he was trying to go for. He makes this play. But I think Walker probably wanted to be a little bit wider when he made his move, even though he makes the out. But you can see the base here when he does make this move. It's narrow. Like you've got to be Christian Walker to make this play. You've got to be an incredible athlete, and you've got to be able to change direction really, really well. For those guys who aren't able to do that, they're going to have to get a much wider base there, or else they're coming over their knee, and they're kind of getting off balance and not being able to catch up to that ball. So really, really, really good play.
This might bring up another point.
Some other factors that impact our
Cody, real quick. This might bring up another point, and I don't want to get down a rabbit hole here, but one way I teach our first baseman in coming off the bag and in regards to their pre-pitch is, so we've got a right-handed hitter up. I always tell our guys at Ohio Wesleyan specifically, but also at Bo Jackson's, if we got a right-handed hitter, we're going to try and work ourselves off the line one extra step. So you see he squares up to the hitter, and then, Walker takes kind of a shuffle step right. It's probably a harder shuffle step than I've seen some first basemen do. Whereas if you have a lefty, I would say just a slight shuffle, or sorry, just a slight turn without the shuffle to kind of maintain that line there. I don't know how you guys teach it, but I think that's something different that I don't think a lot of people get into with their first baseman. And I think it's, when you talk about that extra movement coming off the base, I think sometimes it slows a first baseman down, a first baseman's reactions down, because they're trying to get off the base, trying to, get off the line there. So I don't know how you guys teach it, but I always think that's an interesting, like I said, interesting piece of coaching that kind of goes unnoticed sometimes.
Yeah, I think along.
I want to go back and look.
Yeah, I think along with that, like, and Cody, you mentioned it a little bit earlier too, of just like holding runners on in general, whether that's first base or in the middle infield. Like, I don't think as coaches we could do a better job of this, of teaching how do we still get an effective prep step, whether you're a first baseman, you're holding a runner on, or you're a second baseman and you're holding a runner on, like what that looks like, and teaching that and working that into practice, and how important that piece of it is as well. And then also this video brings up, like we talked about, how does depth affect like your prep step? How does that affect, in your guys' opinion, how's that affect, your teaching of it to a player?
Yeah, and I think when I'm teaching this, right, this is probably the one scenario when you're that close as a first baseman where I'm saying, hey, maybe you show the glove a little bit more, right? Maybe this isn't holstered, because again, like we're looking at this ball that's scalded. His ground coverage was a step and a dive, right? It's not like he's crazy ranging here. Now, middle infielders, I think I might teach a little bit different, but especially at the corners where it's harder to read bat path. It's one of those things where you're understanding that the reaction time is so much more impacted than seeing something up the middle. So like having the glove out and ready now. Again, Walker's is fairly holstered. He's a little bit out in front, probably a little bit more so than he normally is when he's back, but nowhere near where Santana was. So it's interesting, like kind of the personal preferences and the things that work for some guys. But one of my things that I think I would be pretty concrete on is like our posture as we're prep stepping needs to feel lower. We need to feel lower as we get closer to contact, right? As we get closer to the plate with our depth, just because we need to be able to change that direction, right? And obviously there's a threshold that's too low, but we also, if we're trying to maximize the acceleration of a player, that looks different than the reaction of getting left and right at a lower angle faster, right? Acceleration, we shoot up and out sometimes. When we're just diving and taking one step, it's much different. It's like a return on a leadoff versus a takeoff on a leadoff. It's just a different direction of organizing our body. So, yeah, I like those notes. Those are good. I'm stealing stuff from you guys this episode, by the way. That's awesome. Okay, so what are some other factors that impact our prep step? Pitchers who alter delivery tempo and timing, for sure, especially with guys kind of like Cortez, where you've got to feel the flight before anything. You can't just read his delivery, and that's effective on the mound, but it also can throw off your prep steps if you're not really locked in. The other things are pitch selection. You need to know what's coming. If you think it's a fastball and you start to see flight, and then you're like, oh, it's a breaker, you're going to be off time. We're going to be way early. So, and then the other thing are shifts. If we're limited in our shift, like we saw from the Volpe video, maybe we're getting a little bit more momentum. That's at a specific level of baseball. Other levels, I don't think I would teach that much. I think it'd be more like, hey, I'm just going to put my guys where I need to. Try to be as neutral when we get our prep step, unless we're anticipating a pitch and we've got a really good idea. Okay, he's going here. Like Brandon mentioned earlier with the 2-0 count, you got Alvarez up. He's looking to go pull side, something like that. Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. So stuff like that. Any other factors you guys can think of that would kind of mess with our prep step timing there?
No, I think it's just important, like what you mentioned, shifts. Obviously, in professional baseball is gone now, so the importance factor of a prep step is just went up even more. College baseball, we don't have as much data as professional baseball, so being able to cover as much ground as possible is still really important on our end. So no, I think those are great factors, but the shift one is definitely huge for sure.
Gotcha. Let's dive into the next thing here. So these are some drills that we like to use for our prep step time. This is something I stole from Tyler. I'm working with Alex Kelly at Ohio State here. Tyler, I think, got this from Chase Gerbic. And it's just a 2 machine drill. We're working at our left-handed hitter stakes as a second baseman right now. And then he flows into his right-handed hitter stakes after. But we're really focusing with the camera on where he's landing. And I want to see him landing with open feet because I'm playing the flight of the ground balls to his extremes. We're noticed there, that ball's straight at him, right? So we're going to be landing a little bit closed. As he's making these plays, we want him to read the flight and then make his decision on how he's landing post-flight. Now, with a bat, it's way easier. You can see bat path. With the machine, it's a little bit more difficult. There, we can see the right foot opens up. We're able to get to the right more, create a little bit more forgiving route on that attack as well, which is what we're looking for too. So it's just a little bit of variability into the drill. Doesn't have to be something that makes him grind for it. We saw there we were landing with our left foot open. And what we want our players to do is maximize that range, right? So how close can we get to contact while still being able to organize our body and see flight? That's the ultimate goal. If a ball is hit right at us and we haven't registered that flight yet, we're already in the path of the ball, so we're good. We see the ball to our extremities more. Like on that play, we noticed that happened really quick. We want to find that timing where it gets us as quick as possible. And once we start to play with different flight visuals, like a ball closer to our eyes, that's going to be a little bit more hesitant of a move. Just because you haven't read the direction, you haven't read the spin yet, there's no need to be moving without seeing the flight first. We don't want to guess here. We can anticipate, but we definitely don't want to guess. The flight is the proof. Let our feet kind of do what they need to do after that. So again, that's a fun drill with a really good player. It makes life look easy. When it comes to let me go back to that. Go ahead.
Yeah. In this video, looks like the guy's timing off of you too, right? It looks like you have your both arms
I've got
up.
double balls. He's timing on when my hands drop, not when the ball shoot out. If it's when the ball shoot out, he's going to be a little bit late.
Yeah.
It's one of those things too. With a bat, it's easier to feel, but yeah.
Yeah. I think a progression, and I do this with our guys, a progression too that I start off with before I get to this is I go off of them. So and I do it sometimes where I'll wait till they land and I shoot it and they see and they feel, wow, like I really can't move here. Versus when I go and I have good timing of seeing their descent and I let one of them go, they feel that difference. And then I move to, this kind of progression to where now they have to figure out the timing for themselves a little bit more. But just wanted to kind of throw that in there as well.
For sure. And I think one of the tougher concepts that my guys have had to deal with in the past are like just understanding what it feels like without having a great visual, which is why I like the videos and them being able to see the 3D of the guys moving. But when you can record them from behind, before we do any of this video work at this point, he's already done an infinite number of self-videoed video delay stuff. So it just makes it easier when they can see it themselves and then apply it. And for those videos, it's just for me to go back and see like, hey, how close to contact can we get? And those videos are kind of where I nerd out. But here's a weird play, right? We got 104 degrees off, or 104 mile an hour off the bat. Weird visual launching at 4 degrees. It's weird because it's not so far away from his body that he needs to roll into this to range. And he has to be a little bit more hesitant with his moves to read that flight first, right? So what we'll see here, and this will get slowed down a bit too, but he lands square and then tucks the right foot in. That's, Brandon, where landing on the balls of your feet, like you mentioned earlier, comes in so important, right? If you're not able to quickly make your adjustments, it's all about step forgiveness and in this space too. So being able to kind of make that adjustment on a ball flight that's a little bit more difficult is super, super valuable because these plays happen all the time too. just because we're trying to expand the range doesn't mean we get those most often. In fact, those are the more rare balls. It's when it comes to the balls that the flight doesn't force us to range as much, still being able to take forgivable steps and being able to read flight at the correct time. That's where this comes into play. So again, we'll watch this one more time too, where we see the feet. Watch the feet land square and then a quick tuck into his right foot, because we'll see in another video. If he were to catch this at the extremities of his range, then he'd just be rolling into that right foot step, right? But instead, this is a little bit closer, so visually he catches it later, which means his feet are landing, then he makes his adjustment. And Tyler, going back to what you said about infield end, we can notice the difference in what Volpe did earlier in the middle about how tall he was. Look how much lower he gets when he goes to make this move here, right? And so feeling that lower posture when the infield's in is very important. But again, we talked about the timing when we're maximizing range, right? Once we slow this down, we're going to put this to 1/4 speed here and see Volpe's right foot open up. And so just because our infield's in doesn't mean we stop taking that post-contact step. In fact, it's almost more important just to limit damage sometimes. But we're noticing here that right foot can just tuck and go, right? We don't have to land neutral. And so, again, that's a wild amount of range he covers there. And the goal, obviously, is to get that out at home. But being able to time that up correctly is super important. So as close to contact as we can while still being able to organize our bodies is important. Because, and in all honesty, if he's late here, if he's too late on a ball that's scalded to him, Tyler, we talked about it, like this, it might be something where he can't handle, like he doesn't have time to drop step, right? So you really have to hunt for that slot, and then the consistency and being able to hit that slot is so important, especially when you're in a situation like this where you've got to make sure you're in for a reason. You're trying to get the out of home, but then also limit damage when things don't go your way.
Yeah, and this is where I would always be careful. Like, Volpe's an extraordinary athlete, right? When you're teaching amateur guys, whether that's, low-level minor leaguers to college guys to high school or middle school guys, as a coach, we're strategizing, we're pulling the infield in. What are we looking to do? We're looking to get rid of range, and we're trying to, be ready for the ball right at to be able to make a play at home plate. So, for me, right or wrong, my belief is I want guys lower. Now, the timing piece, as you mentioned, that's concrete for me too. Like, we're still late. But for me, it's I want the glove lower. I want our body lower. I want our posture a little bit more forward. Now, that could be determined on each guy, whether that's a 45-degree or 60-degree, whatever. But a big belief of mine, especially for the younger guy, not as athletic as Volpe, it's pretty important, I believe. Like, from a coach's standpoint, I'm going to be mad if we don't make that play that's right at me when we're trying to get the out at home versus, all right, a squeaker gets through and our guy didn't range enough.
Right. I dig it. Well, guys, that is all I have. Is there anything else you guys want to add on this kind of stuff? I mean, we covered a lot of bases there.
Yeah, I think diving in, Zink, you mentioned a little bit earlier, like batting practice is really important. I love we talked a little bit about the machine and how we videotape. What are some other ways that you guys incorporate practicing of the prep step, and whether it's individual work or like a team defensive work?
I mentioned it before we got on here. I think one of the biggest things I didn't mention at the beginning, but it reminded me watching the video of Alex Kelling a few minutes ago and comparing it to Volpe here. And Tyler, I think you mentioned it a couple of videos ago with us. Your ability to come off the ball, and the way I tell our infielders is we want to work fast to slow. If we want to work as fast as possible coming off of our pre-pitch, and then if we have that ability to control our feet after that to field the ball, fantastic. But we always want to start fast coming off the ball. So like I mentioned it, before we got on here, I love like isolating the descent. So how I've done that before, and I mentioned to you guys earlier, is I'll take like plyo boxes or something where players have to come off and they have to feel their descent from the box or from whatever that heightened object is, and they have to feel how their body reacts coming down. And you can start off with a high box and go to kind of a medium size to a lower box, to where they have kind of a longer time, maybe have to react earlier coming off the box, but they're essentially internally trying to think how do I react? How does my body react in space? And then how do I react once I hit the ground? So that's one thing I think, we love as infielders, or as infield coaches, I should say, we love isolation drills. So I think that was kind of one thing that I came up with, like trying to isolate just, my step down. I mean, obviously not everybody does a vertical step, but if we can feel how our feet react as they reach the ground or as they touch the ground on that pre-pitch, I just think it's kind of that muscle memory type idea of, here's how my feet are going to react with a certain hit, but then just kind of adding on to that. But yeah, no, watching those videos, I definitely think the better we can teach players to come off the ball and be as quick as possible. And again, Cody, watching that video of Alex, like getting his right foot under him going right, it seemed like he was better going left than he was going right, because it was almost like he was taking a wider step to his right versus being a little bit more controlled and keeping that step under him going to his left. So I think it's, our job as coaches to put these guys in the best position, understand what works best for each player. I know we talked a little bit about hand placement before we jumped on here, but like, I know I mentioned I like guys keeping their hands closer to their hips. Some guys like their hands out here. I sent you pictures a few minutes ago of Carlos Santana. He's got one hand in front and one hand to his side, which I understand. Like if you're playing the corners, you want to be able to turn that glove over on a backhand play. So I think understanding where you're positioned and what's most comfortable for each.
There's also that picture of Chapman, right, who's extremely low. Yeah. Hands are basically scraping the ground at third base, which I find is interesting. And it's a picture I show our corner infielders all the time. Hey, when we're closer, especially when we're base even or in front, we have to expect a hot shot in our glove, and our hands have to be ready for that. But no, I think those are all good points too.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that, Tyler, too. I just clocked this on this video here, but let me rewind this. So we talk about like that corner being a little bit more difficult of a read. Look at the third baseman's prep step. Mm-hmm. It's much less vertical. It's a much more calm kind of gather move. Barely, really.
And that goes a little lower.
Yeah. Right. So you find the spots where the visuals are maybe more difficult, or the players who have a more difficult time orienting their bodies in that space. Because again, it does come down to reaction time. Like if you're landing, 0.270 after contact, and you don't have the time to read that when you're this close, and then also orient your body, maybe that's not the right spot to be playing, or maybe that's the wrong technique to be using. So there are a lot of things that can kind of go into this. But I think Brandon, you're right. Putting these guys in situations where they can learn to kind of maneuver and figure out what works best at what depth and what positioning is super, super important, because it just adds to the comfortability of the play, and then gives them a better idea about what works and what doesn't.
Go ahead, Zach.
I was just going to say, I think the biggest thing is, we're talking to a wide range of coaches. I think the biggest thing is simplifying it. Like I pulled up a video earlier I was going to send you guys, but and when we've seen it elsewhere too, where the third baseman's doing one kind of pre-pitch movement, the shortstop's doing one pre-pitch movement, the second baseman's doing something different. But ultimately they're all on time, quote unquote, on time being a certain point of view, but everyone's on time. They're athletic. Their eyes are in the hitting zone, and they're ready to move, like Tyler mentioned, ready to move left, right, forward, back. So I think just keeping it as simple as possible and just working off of, simplistic ideas is probably the easiest way to get it going.
That's what I was going to say, Zink. So,
Great mind.
and that's like, and I was going to bring this up to you guys. Right or wrong, again, I can have this argument, but for me and our infielders, I mandate everybody hops. Like it's everybody does it. One, it's easy for each guy to see if they're on time, because I'll coach first base in our inter squads, and randomly I'll have my phone and I sneak it out and I'm taking video of our third baseman and our shortstop in one view. And all right, who's on time, who's off time? I don't care. I want both of you guys landing at the same time. If one of you guys are off, I'm going to be pretty mad, even though I don't have the pitch in the view. But it just kind of holds those guys accountable to, hey, we need to be good. We need to be on time, which is late. So I mandate the hop for everybody, and I mandate we're always late. Now, the things that are flexible for me is posture. I was working with one of our younger guys the other day. He mentioned, like Lindor, this is a perfect picture. He feels like, the guy that I was working with, he feels like he needs to be more upright. He needs to feel like he's more 90 degrees, because when he was taking reps and he was more 75, 60 degrees, he felt like his weight was too forward and he couldn't go back whenever there was a hard hit ball. So that was an adjustment we made. But there's some guys that they feel like they have to have their chest forward. Otherwise, they almost feel stuck. So there's some individualized things, I think, within the prep stuff. But to Zink's point, like the wide range of coaches, whether you're a high school coach and you're coaching up, you got 12 infielders and it's just you, like, it's still really important. The prep stuff, I believe, and I think you guys agree, is one of the most important pieces to developing infielders. So there's some things you need to be concrete on.
For sure.
I love that idea of having everybody hop. I think it just creates an ability to kind of feel their feet on the ground and feel their feet moving. But the only other point, Cody, I was going to make is like at Ohio Wesleyan, for example, what I'll do is I'll take my phone and I'll like cut the field in half, and I'll make sure I get the catcher, the pitcher, the third and short, for example. I'll even go, and you've been to Ohio Wesleyan, like I'll even go into the visitor dugout during like games or BP, and I'll just set my phone up and I'll just record a couple of pitches, and then I'll do the same thing in the home dugout and record first and second base. But I'll make sure I get the pitcher and catcher just to see what's the timing, what the pitcher look like, and then seeing, as the ball enters the hitting zone, what are we looking like physically from an infielder standpoint, timing, athleticism, all of that stuff. We all know that players nowadays, they love the instant feedback, they love the video. So as much as I can incorporate, I'm always doing it. So just another example of things we can do to help show players where they're at.
And if I can say one last thing, I don't know if you guys have ever had the pleasure of watching a pre-game Vanderbilt BP session. Those guys, I mean, it's incredible. Like every pitch, every single one of their infielders are prep stepping. And in their BP routine, it seems like the first round for hitters, all of their infielders are in, every single one of them hopping, and they're on time. And then second round of BP, they all move back. It's pretty special. It's I kind of geek out about it because I loved watching it as a coach, as a spectator.
And incorporating that too, like intentionality. That's the biggest word. If we're going to incorporate that, make sure players are intentional with it. Because, I mean, how many times, Ty and Cody, have we watched a BP session and guys don't take it seriously? I think intentionality is the biggest factor when we're adding those in, and whether it's practice, pregame, whatever.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about how much a guy takes pride in his craft. With Tyler, you've mentioned it in our previous videos, but like a lot of times when the technique's been introduced, it comes down to like an effort type deal. Not that they're trying to be lazy, but like an intentionality, like Brandon said, of applying the effort and correctly doing the technique every time, right? Yeah. Because the time you do it's going to be the time where you have to range up the middle and you don't get there. And then the second we go back to video review and we're in the classroom the next day, it's like, hey, listen, we can see why it didn't happen. You're good enough to get there, right? But we can see here, like, you're off time, you're late, you're stuck in the muck. So I think
that happens a lot, right? Your opposite side infielders, right? You got a lefty hitter up and your third baseman. It's the baseball gods. The baseball gods will get you if you take a play off. That third baseman, you better be ready. It's coming your way.
Sure, for sure. Well, guys, thank you so much. This is awesome. I'm learning a ton. I know the people listening are going to get a kick out of this. This is going to be something that's super helpful. Thank you again to Valley Sporting Goods for sponsoring this episode. Thank you to Brandon. Thank you for Tyler for being here. This is an awesome opportunity for you guys to get a little bit of an idea into the minds of some really good baseball instructors, as well as get some video data on some of the best guys in the game. So thanks again to the guys for being on here, and thanks to you for listening. We will see you next time.